Whenever you're ready. All right, calling to order the City of Essex Junction Planning Commission meeting for Thursday, February 1st, 6:35 p.m. Any agenda additions or changes? Sounds like we want to add space to discuss the rental registry.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'll do an update of the strategic planning exercise at member,
Is there a particular place we'd like to add that to?
the rental registry.
Yeah, the discussion on the rental registry. After our business items, before our business items?
I think
You could do it as staff updates or whatever.
Oh, sure, that's fine too. Yeah.
We can,
Well, why don't we do it right
you can
after?
do it right away. We'll do it as the first business item. Is that good?
Okay.
It's fine with me.
Yeah, that's fine.
Anything else, additions or changes? All right. Moving on to any comments from the public that are not for items that are on the agenda.
There's nobody on Zoom.
Nobody on Zoom and nobody in the room, so on. Moving on to the minutes from January 4th. Do we have a motion to vote on approving the minutes?
I move.
Second. Right, any discussion on the minutes?
Oh, they look good.
All right. All in favor of approving the minutes as written?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Minutes are approved. I'll say I notice a lot more. I'll notice every sign now in the city driving around after that discussion. All right. Next is our business items. So first we'll talk about rental registry.
All right. So, the city council held the public hearing on the proposed rental registry ordinance on January 24th. That was last Wednesday. I'm not sure if who was here because I was actually remote on that day.
I was remote.
Okay.
And you were on, right?
I watched, yeah.
Yeah, I watched. We both watched.
I wasn't able to attend, but I've heard about it.
Yeah, it looked.
Oh, I heard about it a lot, yeah.
It looked to me like the there were people out the door basically. But ultimately, so leading up to that, the city council had made some minor tweaks, but for the most part, what the planning commission had recommended to council was what was put on the table. In terms of public engagements, we had we'd done the usual social media and website posts, as well as a mail out to every single household in the city. Theoretically, if you've looked through your mail, you should have seen a postcard that looks like that, but that was for strategic planning.
Community meeting.
Yeah,
Community meal.
but we went through the same vendor and the same process to send it out, and I did definitely get some feedback on that. People started receiving them immediately. Of course, some people just say they never received it, but it's also easy for these things to get tucked away. Yeah, so we started getting some feedback. The moment we had sent out those notices, and on the 24th there was a lot of feedback. A lot of interesting comments. We also got some emails from organizations, including Whitcomb Woods. I guess it's called Cathedral Square. Is the landlord there, the nonprofit housing provider, and they had commented that that they think they should be exempt from the fees, and also they think that like ideally they should be exempt from the inspection as well because they were already under a lot of other inspection programs. And I think in the earlier version that That exemption was in there, but city council took it out because of that, the impact on the costs. They had an interesting point that they think their tenants experience inspection fatigue, and I think there's that's, you know, if you are inspected very often, you might not feel as much agency over the place you're living as somebody else who owns their place, or just renting in a traditional direct landlord to tenant relationship. There were a few messages of support, but just like the spread of people who came to speak, there was a lot of kind of negative comments about the proposal. Most of it, I think, centered around costs, and there was a point that in addition to the cost of the annual fee itself, it's also the cost of the labor of coordinating the inspections, because the landlord or a representative would need to be present. But yeah, I mean, in the end, city council decided not to move ahead at this moment. They asked for staff to do some more work. Partially that was to figure out if this program would be a better fit under the fire department. And I know originally we were not thinking about that because the fire department is part-time, and also the city council was interested in having this as a 50% general enforcement, zoning enforcement position, and health officer. So yeah, that's where we stand right now. There's no new date set for the next hearing. But I think the city council does intend to talk about this at least a little bit on the 14th, because there are some implications on the budget, whether or not this is going to belong in the community development department or the fire department, and whether or not that changes the cost structure.
So I have a couple things to say about the situation. I think wait, I put this. So I wasn't at the meeting, nor did I reviewed minutes or the video at all. So I don't know exactly the conversation that was had, but I've heard about some of the comments. I've seen like the front porch forum comments. I've seen all of that. And I think what is clear to me is that we really have a communication issue, and specifically a communication issue between our commission and city council. And I think if we can do a better job, and now that it's back and it's been tabled apparently, and there's going to be more work on it, if we can do a better job on this and with other things in the future that have this sort of impact on the community, that if we can schedule co meetings and times to talk these things out with the counselors, we probably can preempt a lot of these issues that come out last minute. And, you know, the counselors are the elected representatives, so they're the ones that in theory are representing the community, and so they should have a lot of these questions as well. They know what sort of concerns the people are going to come to them with. They have a lot more turnout at their meetings than we do at ours. But I think, like, once I saw all of this and thinking about all the things that we discussed in our meetings about the potential for a housing trust fund to help landlords that are impacted by this, and not seeing if that was ever communicated to council or to the public or where that was at. Like, I think just having those discussions with the counselors during that time would help address a lot of this stuff and make sure that things like that get put into the plan when this goes to them. And then of course, just I think also communication to the public as a whole, just like no one coming to our meetings when we were developing this for a year. Right. And then seeing the turnout at the last minute.
Yeah.
Just if we can do something to better that when we're in our process, so it doesn't get to the point where people feel like it's last minute when it's really not.
So if I could, I want to add a couple of things. One is a conversation I had with Marcus on Tuesday, I think it was, and I reiterated that we wanted to have joint meetings. And Marcus said that he's very aware of that. He's aware also that the council needs to have meetings with not only the planning commission, but some of the other committees as well. But of course, that puts time constraints on the councilors. You know, they already have a pretty large agenda. But he's aware that and I think we said at one of the last meetings that we'd wait till the strategic plan was finished and then have a joint meeting. Well, now the strategic plan won't be done till mid-March, most likely. So that's going to be a while before we can have a meeting with the council. My takeaways, just quickly, I agree with you completely on the communication. And one thing I think we could have probably done a little bit better is try to reach out to the landlords in month 5. It's supposed to month 9 or 10. That's just a little, wish you would have done it. Might have helped. Might not have helped, but it might have helped. My takeaways, I think there's a big deal of confusion about the level and responsibility for inspection. Everybody kept saying, we're already inspected, we're already inspected, we're already inspected. State has this responsibility, we're already inspected. They don't understand the difference between fire marshals and code environmental health inspections. I think there's a big communication gap there. Just something for you guys to maybe note. I think it would be a good idea to get a sense of exactly who does what within the state. I suspect they don't really do proactive, they do complaint based. I think we talked about that, Phil.
Yeah.
And, you know, they have, I think, I don't remember, 12 fire marshals. That's the less than one per county. So you can't expect them to do fire inspection. Also, I think there's confusion about what a health inspection would look like versus a fire inspection. You know, they kept talking about egress and windows and doors and stuff. That's fire marshal. That's not health inspection, I think. But I think it'd be a good idea to get a better sense of who does what, Chris, you know, in terms of talking about this in the future. The other thing I took away was, and I think we talked about this in one of the meetings, is fees for large landowners or developers, the ones that have 200, 300 apartments. You know, I think who was talked about $50,000 a year. Was that Blackstone or was that somebody?
Autumn Putt.
Autumn Pond.
They have a lot of units. I mean,
Yeah.
they're one of the top 3.
So he was saying, you know, it's going to cost me $250,000 for an inspection because he gets it once every 5 years. Not thinking about it's $10 per month per unit. It's $250,000 over 5 years. So I think it's, again, somewhere where we could maybe think a little bit about it. The staggered, what do you want to call it, the split fee structure you had from Rochester, was it? Might be something you guys want to look at again and see whether that makes sense. To think about the large owners, especially if they're getting inspections on elevators and sprinklers and all that stuff on a regular basis. The cost of renovation, if necessary, again, this is fire marshal stuff, but it's housing trust fund. You know, we talked about this at several of the focus group discussions about whether or not we want to move forward on proposing housing trust fund. And the lack of contractors. One person brought up that you can't get a contractor. So if you have a period of time to resolve the issue, you might not be able to get a contractor in time, and then you're penalized. You know, so again, this came up to me. And then again, very, very much confusion over the difference between fire marshals and health safety. And then the last thing is just the idea of putting it in the fire department versus city has put you guys in kind of a bad situation, because you either put the code enforcement in the fire department or you lose it.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we enforce codes if you don't have a code inspector? So these are things I took away from the meeting. And that was getting all the noise out, because there was a great deal of noise, anger, noise,
Yes.
messaging, and
I'll say one more thing too, is that when we started this process, we determined that health and safety was the number one priority for doing this. We also established that the registry would be really good for the city to have to understand the rental housing stock.
Right.
And I think, in having more conversations with council, I think there might be room to address all of this without having the redundancy of inspections. I mean, just something I floated was the idea that we could help facilitate maybe complaints from tenants, because that's one of the biggest things, is that if a tenant has to complain to the state, that then that puts them in a precarious position with their landlord. But if we can somehow coordinate that with the state, so that they're not the person that's going out there and doing that, and we're doing that for them, maybe we have a lower cost registry that we don't actually do inspections, but we more coordinate. Just like a floating idea of like, how do we still accomplish the goals that we set out to do without necessarily making it so costly.
But you remember, Phil, one of the things we talked about in day one of this was whether or not we wanted to have a rolling implementation of the program.
Mm-hmm.
So that the first year might be exactly that: indexing, database management, development, and getting a sense of what the stock looks like.
Yeah.
And then after 1 year, you can decide, okay, do we go for inspections? Gives you a year to talk to the landlords and stuff.
Yeah. But I think that's something that would be like good to talk about with council now
Yeah.
at this point, as far as like, what are other options where, because we never did get to talk to them. We never did get to present like, this is where we're coming from. This is the idea. This is what
Yeah.
what we want to do.
Well, one of the things that I won't replicate what you guys had talked about, but one of the pieces I think, and it's not just the rental registry, but it's like all presentations, is that when we make a presentation, or any of us make a presentation to the public, you got to realize the public hasn't been here. So we may have been talking about it for a year. They're at square one, actually square zero. So we need to realize that when presentation, let's say to the council, we have the discussion or whatever, that if the public is going to be watching us, we need to start at square zero. Okay, and we need to say, here's what's been accomplished over the last year, and bring everybody up forward with us. Because that was one of the comments I got, was like, what the heck are you talking about? Okay. I said, well, you guys could have come and visited. We've been talking about this for, and no. Okay. They're totally oblivious. They just got these sudden, like, they asked the postcard, where they responded, but it was not a positive thing. But to make it a positive event, we need to bring people up to where we are and why we're doing it and whatever, because that's an important piece. If it's going to be effective, people need to know why we're doing it. And the other part I got was, well, you're picking on me. And it's like, well, I can't tell you about the apartments that, are maybe triggering this. Can't share with who that is, but just be acknowledged that there are some out there. And thank you for being a good landlord. Right? It's a very interesting discussion to try to do some active listening on
But
2 days.
the other thing, to build on your point, is that the last discussion we had on Tuesday at the community engagement thing is trying to figure out in the future, hopefully this will get into the strategy, is how to target those groups for individual actions that are in the strategic plan for the next 5 years. So if you're talking about tree management, what are the groups you need to talk to about that? If you're talking about housing, who are the groups that you communicate with? So that you have those sort of linkages and connections before you have to find out who they are. You start building those networks. So you can have people have conversations. Anyway, long way to go.
Hey, it's, we live and learn, and we'll just keep moving forward. And now that we know that we need to bring everybody else along, we'll just do that next time.
Philip, if I may respond to some of those comments.
Yeah, for sure.
So I would say that I think it would be helpful for the city council to have a separate meeting with the planning commission before something big like this, for sure. But they have spent like prior to this public hearing, they had spent 2 other meetings, or at least parts of 2 other meetings, discussing this. And Raj and Amber have also been speaking directly with Regina and myself to understand the details. So I think there's a lot that they know about, which maybe the members of the public who were present did not. But the city council did not have time to respond to. There were so many comments that they were just listening to comments instead of responding to each one. So, like, for example,
Which I think was wise,
right,
quite honestly.
right, it's way too much. You can't really have it's a one-way thing. It's not really a two-way conversation at that point, right? But like, for example, the housing trust fund, they knew, like, when we were working through the budget and the price proposal, they knew there's depending on how the costs end up playing out, if there's like a surplus that could end up going towards a housing trust fund. And the confusion about what the Vermont Department of Fire Safety does on a complaints basis and what this position would do. I mean, I think it makes sense that there was some confusion because there were a lot of changes made implemented by the state recently. I mean, I tried to make that clear how the division of labor in that presentation that preceded the public comment time. I do think that the city councilors were quite aware of how that's divided. But yeah, the department's division of fire safety has taken over the rental housing health code, and now it's called the rental housing health safety code. In fact, over the next year or two, they're trying to integrate that more with to be a part of their fire codes. But it is the fire marshal. If you file a complaint, which now they have a form online on the Division of Fire Safety site, you get referred to them, unless there's a municipal inspection agreement, which we had intended, which we still intend to, if this moves forward, enter in a municipal inspection agreement with them. So with such an agreement, our inspector would need to be certified fire inspector. There's it's like a 40-hour course to get the minimum certification. I feel like it's not too onerous to send someone to do that, and you get basically kind of limited powers of kind of a power of attorney. We tried to make that clear, but I do think that there's some people that didn't totally understand that. But also, it is true that there is some duplication between what the Division of Fire Safety now provides in terms of an inspection service versus what the city would do. Because previously, prior to the Division of Fire Safety taking over these functions, this was, if somebody filed a complaint about rental housing property, it went to the town health officer. The Division of Fire Safety only took a look if it was a fire-related issue. So now they've added a few inspectors to deal with the increased workload, but it's not nearly enough to be proactive. Mixed fee structure, that had been brought up before, where the larger landlords, because of the efficiencies, perhaps don't deserve to have to pay as much. That was brought up, and I'd come up with 2 separate proposals, but they had to balance out. The budgets had to balance, and in order to have a meaningful reduction in the fees for the multi-unit buildings, the small the kind of single unit landlords would have to have a significant increase in fees to make it balance out. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that we think it would take half a person to do this inspection role. But we're trying to squeeze another half out of this to fill the health officer and the kind of zoning enforcement position. So I mean, I do think there is that is a part of what makes it complicated. And when this is considered, if this is considered a part of the fire department, you know, there's it may play out differently. You know, if they think that it would combine with an existing, some existing work that they already have funded, maybe it would be different. But then we wouldn't have the additional enforcement position. Which, I mean, I would also say having additional enforcement staff on the community development department could be helpful, but also there is work to be done to determine what the deficiencies in zoning enforcement really are. Because I do think that there in a lot of the issues that have been brought up about zoning enforcement have to do with our bylaws. Like, you know, the whole sign thing. Like, we have some ability to enforce, but we can't really enforce something that is not well written. So like the first step is always cleaning up the bylaws, and you know, like it's possible that it's not. It might not be so clear what the enforcement, the additional enforcement half position would deliver in the first while. The idea about scaling this so that the city offers like helps with the complaints but does not inspect ourselves. I think that might be a little bit counterproductive as to being proactive, because
It wouldn't be proactive at all.
Right. Just because there's another, I mean, it would help for someone who doesn't, you know, has like language barriers or something. But if the fear is that there could be, you know, retaliation or something, just because you you complain to a third party who then complains, you know, it's kind of obvious, right?
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, those are my responses.
Just in response to what you said about the council meeting a couple times before the public hearing, it wasn't my intention to say that they hadn't met about it before. I just meant that we hadn't talked to them. And so like, I feel that we can put as much intention on the page like we did with what we had written, but then things might be missed, and that doesn't really come out until you have someone else like questioning you about this, and then we might realize like, oh, that actually wasn't our intention, and we can, you know, it can be adjusted. So that was just my point about meeting with them on things like that.
We do have one member of the public on Zoom now, Cora DeLucia.
Any other discussion on the rental registry program at this point? And we're open to comments from the public if that is something that wanted to be made.
If you're online, if you would like to make a comment, you may unmute yourself if you'd like.
Hi, sorry. I'm Cora DeLucia. I just joined late. I didn't actually hear what you were talking about.
No problem. We've just been discussing the rental registry, the current status of the rental registry program. And we were just ending our discussion on that and moving on to the next business item of the night. Just noticed that you had joined the meeting, so wanted to open it up if you had a comment.
Oh, no, I think I'm okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cora. Okay, moving on to the next business item, the sign regulations.
Let me get this all set up. I'll share screen. There we go. All right. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend the last planning commission meeting back in January. However, Chris passed on your comments to me, and I did my best to catch up with all of the changes necessary for the chapter on sign regulations. So this memorandum was just to call out specifically what issues I looked at, which things I tried to correct, and then every page that in that chapter, and then the sections on lighting, minor sections here and there that have suggested amendments called out so that you could look at them. So, yeah. Any comments on this? I can. It's very long, so I can skip back and forth between pages if there's anything specific.
Well, the only changes, correct me if I'm wrong, the only changes are the bullets that you have in the memo from
Yes.
last time. All the other text that was in there is what we talked about last time,
Yes.
which is based on Burlington sign language.
Yes, that's correct.
So when you spoke about 714 being -O being reorganized into two subsections, what are you talking about? Because I saw that the part there are parts of a different page interjected into. I was kind of going, is this trying to go from OP and then down to M and then trying to go somewhere else? I was going, well, everything seemed to make sense. I guess just eventually it'll all get into order.
Yeah, that was one where there was a bullet point under it, and it was like section O, and then like A, and then 1, and there was nothing else under it. So just restructuring that so it made a little more sense. I think now it's section O, and then points 1 and 2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's just a little cleanup, just a little
Well,
format.
it's yeah. When you pulled things out, you pulled a different part of another page of the previous section, and I went, why is this still here? Well, whatever. And yeah, I figured it'll be eventual cleanup.
Yeah, there's going to be a couple of technical fixes.
Yeah. Well, but the verbiage itself looked good.
Mm-hmm. All right, it's M, and there's O, yeah. Yeah, so that was just restructuring that into points 1 and 2.
Right. Well, yeah. So then if you go down another couple pages, it goes back to M or something over there. I went, oh.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
So that's what I was asking about.
I see what you mean.
Okay.
Yeah, I think an extra copy of that page got
Okay.
shuffled into
'Cause
here.
I wasn't quite sure what was going on there. I thought that was done, but okay, maybe I missed it.
I had some issues when exporting the file, and I tried to clean it up. I must have missed this one. So
But there's no problem with the actual.
no,
Right now.
No.
I just had to-
Just kind of put it in there and I went,
yeah,
why is it there? Okay.
just a duplicate. Yeah, I had to
Actually-
export it in a couple of like sections and then combine those into one PDF. So
Okay.
Mhm.
Copy and paste error. Okay.
Just an idea for, as we work through more of the land development code, we could, when we send out the packet, we can also send you the Word document separately. I think then you can turn on track changes, you can turn off track changes to just see the clean version, and it might just be easier than
Well, yeah, that would be very helpful, because I'm not even sure what the version looks like now.
right.
Based on, I mean, I have a hard copy at home, but it's months old. I'm sure it's completely out of date.
I had a question about the time limits on the string lights. Was 9 p.m. selected for a reason?
no, it was rather arbitrarily chosen as if we need to have a time limit. That seemed kind of an appropriate estimate of when businesses such as dining establishments might be closing up for dinner around that time in the evening. But that's entirely flexible. So like if you have a better time to suggest, we can change it.
It seems a little early to me, just because you're going to be using those outdoor in the summer, and the sun's just going to go down at 8:30 in the summer, and I don't know. It seemed early to me.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, because he's got the lights on over there right now.
I mean,
I'm not sure, is he, well,
It's only 7 p.m. now, though.
It's, well, okay, I do recognize a lot of our businesses roll up the sidewalk at 8 o'clock. Okay,
I would-
some of them roll, it's 8:30, and then there's some really late rollers at 9. But I'm not sure how many, I think there's some takeout places that are still open at 10.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I'm not out and about, so I don't know anymore. Okay,
There.
so, you know, that's the limit to my personal observation. But,
10 sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah.
Personally, I like 11, but that's personally.
Yeah.
10 sounds reasonable.
I'd even go for 11. I think that's reasonable. Because in the summertime, you're right. I mean, it's not only 8:30, it's 9.
Yeah, I think about like the outdoor space across the street, summer,
Mm-hmm.
outdoor space
Lincoln.
for McGillicuddy's,
Yeah, the Lincoln
outdoor
Inn,
space, the Lincoln Inn, outdoor space, any other
Yeah.
bar or restaurant that wants to
Well,
have
there-
some outdoor space, which
yeah,
is
there's a variety of bars and things that have, you know, outdoor spaces.
I guess when does it become annoying? Like how late does it have to be for it to become annoying? That's probably the limit,
Well, and the question is, who is it annoying to?
right?
If we're talking about businesses, I mean, they're pretty much centered in the 5 corners of Pearl Street. So there are how many residential homes do we have in those areas? I mean,
Well,
You're
we
back-
do
you're
have
back.
them. We
You're
still
back.
have them.
well, we're putting more in every day.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's true.
and
And
I'm
next
sure
to
that
the
there might be more
traffic.
occasions that, you know, especially when you have 3-story buildings going next to a 2-story business, that there might be, the lighting might be offensive to somebody at some point. I mean, as I was coming here and going this light into somebody's basement door and going, geez, here I am driving and it smacked me right in the eyes. Because it's just the right height to be at the same height as headlights.
Yep.
And it's, wow.
Yep.
I was like going, great, but it's got to be slanted or something.
So two things just popped in my head. One I would say noise probably would become more annoying before the light does. And I think
true.
we have a noise ordinance of 10, right? Is that right?
I can check. I
It's
don't remember off the
it's
top
not
of my
important
head,
to check
but
right now, but
yeah.
then I just thought also that a lot of those spaces that might use string lights for lighting, that's the only lighting they have in those areas. And you'd want them to use that for cleaning up, for being able to clean up those spaces after they close. So trying to give leeway to.
Well, I mean, it's harder like Pearl Street is a dark area. You know, it's
Well,
McDonald's and then Wendy's and
actually, the lights, depending if they've got them all on, it's a landing strip.
yeah, I know.
That if you really are, you know, want to read something by street light, you can do it there, no problem. Which I think is why some of them are gotten down to only half lit, half the streets.
But it's just that, you know, string lights compared to the lights we already have.
Right.
Is it really that much of a nuisance to have a couple of places with string lights? I
We're
mean,
writing this code for like the next 5 to 10, so I'm going, what, you know, having the allowance for somebody to come up and say, you know, I live on the 3rd floor of someplace and it's staring me in the eyes, I can't, you know. At least they have that room for discussion. I don't know. It all depends on what business moves next to what business. You know, or as housing changes on Pearl Street or Park Street. It's in flux as things are moving. How can we forecast that at this point? I'd rather say, okay, you know, like I said, the sidewalks get rolled out. You know, in a lot of different places. So in some cases may not be a problem. The bar around the corner for me, I'm sure, I don't know how long they go. Okay, all I know is that I'm not there when they close. So I don't.
so is 10 a reasonable thing then?
I would.
10 sounds good.
I think most of those places around here close at 9:30, so most of the restaurants. I mean, McGillicuddy's is open later, and the Hornet's Nest is open later.
All right.
So 10's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I know Murray's used to have a spot out on the sidewalk, but I heard that place has been sold, but the next owner may want to have
Yeah,
outside, especially in August, it's all.
we're all curious.
Again, 10 sounds reasonable to me. I would pick 11. I would also think, I also like the other side of this is the, like what you mentioned, the teeth on the enforcement side. But also, I'm just thinking, I wouldn't want, to me, string lighting is nice. I wouldn't want businesses to replace it with
Something
aggressive else that's more aggressive that is then allowed because of this. So I don't, hard to know what the impact of that would be, but that seems like a rabbit hole. 10 o'clock is definitely upping it from.
Well, I'm sure that business could apply and say, I'd like to have my permit extended on it. And let's be open for discussion. Let's see if the DRB agrees with that. I mean,
Well, for that to be a possibility, it would have to be written in that's a
To have
possibility.
an addendum for
well, then,
exceptions are available under
Right.
like circumstance.
Yeah.
I guess I would say let's, we could have that exception there. I mean, I'd rather have the discussion than not.
Well, this has to go to public hearing too, right?
True.
The LDC revisions.
I would up
Yes,
it
it
to
would.
10, and if there's feedback, whether at public hearing or later on in the future, then it's like we can always go back. It can always be gone back, adjusted.
Yep.
So it sounds like 10 is the way to go for now.
Yeah, tend to get some feedback from the public.
All right, sounds good.
So I have a general comment, which is building on, I think Phil's comment, which is when I look at the sign, it's called bylaws or regulations, it's part of the LDC. And the other things we're talking about, it comes back to this thing about code enforcement again. I mean, the sign requirements are pretty complicated. So, again, who's going to enforce these things if somebody's not in compliance? Obviously, they have to get, so remind me here. So for any sign that in here, all signs basically have to be approved?
Not all signs.
Windows, what about window signs and?
Window signs would have to be approved, but you could put up like things in your window though. Scroll down to that section.
I mean, you don't have to tell me exactly which ones, but
So temporary signs do not have to be approved, and then most permanent signs would have to receive a zoning permit.
so they would all go through your office to the DRB? Is that the way?
Not to the DRB, just
to
staff.
your office?
Mostly
Staff
staff
approval.
approval.
Yeah.
Unless I think it might have been written in there now. The one about the giants vertical. What's it called?
Yeah. Yeah, the really big
Yeah.
freestanding sign, or not freestanding.
The Flint Theater one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Marquee.
Marquee.
No, marquee is a moving. You know.
Yeah, and the one that sticks out.
Yeah.
Projected sign.
Projected sign.
That's the
The
that's the section.
Burlington version of the projected signs. Yeah.
Yeah, so here we have a section on temporary signs, which goes into some different categories there, including sandwich boards, real estate signs, election period signs, things like that, that like we don't have to approve it, but it does put on like slight limitations saying like, periods of time in which like you can do that. If it's a real estate sign, then it's associated, it has to be removed within 3 days after the agreement has been executed or anything like that. So yeah, temporary signs would fall into that category of things that we don't have to approve.
But again, my question is, if somebody's not in compliance, you just wait for complaints, or is this proactive? Does this depend upon whether or not you get the halftime position, or?
So
It's not only this, it's everything
Right.
else that's in the LDC. I mean, it's an enormous workload when you think about it,
right.
if you're proactive.
Yeah, so I think that so proactive enforcement would be more of a possibility when there is, like if we have half FTE person dedicated to that. at the same time, I do think there are some serious considerations to think about before going out and doing proactive enforcement, because you could be digging up things that neighbors don't have a problem with. And of course, if it's an issue that I think that's very much related to nuisances. If it's something that a neighbor would find annoying, then doing proactive enforcement might find things, you might be uncovering things that nobody actually has a problem with, but then you're forcing somebody to make a change. I mean, like you could argue that is if we have a rule that's written a certain way, everybody should be in compliance, but it might not be a very popular decision politically. So I mean, I do think there's always going to be like decisions about focus, and like of course anything that has to do with health and safety, that would be the first, that would be how the first level of focus, right? But we have done proactive enforcement campaigns, like for example, like we tried with the sign campaigns to some success. I think the important thing with any proactive enforcement campaign is to start with information, right, and to follow up, and we do have the ability to do that to a certain extent, unless it's a time sensitive kind of issue. If it's lights being off by 10 p.m., I mean, that's hard. It's hard to enforce, but also, are we going to spend, even if we had the resources, would you really send the light police out there to
Well, it's just like,
to check?
as the sidewalks get rolled up at 8:30, and those sandwich boards are still sitting out there. Yeah, especially when they're still there at 5 in the morning, whose sandwich board wins. And I think that's kind of been the philosophy is I mean, there are sandwich boards up until it just recently snowed that were covered in snow. So I know that they have not been transported inside for the night. But okay, it's just life. I guess until we get the regulations here, we get them new and people know that they're supposed to bring them in again. Maybe we can then say hi. We really are going to enforce it now. It's no longer a free for all on the street.
And for things like sandwich boards, actually, we do have some ability to be out there to see it before business opens, right? If it's open when we first show up before their business hours, that would be out of compliance. Now, taking it to the next level and actually moving forward with legal enforcement, that there's always, like, we want to go towards voluntary compliance, wherever possible. It's very expensive and perhaps not a popular method of using taxpayer dollars to enforce some of these issues.
Perhaps if we do enough good publicity on that is changing, people will step first.
All right. Any further comment on signs?
I just had one quick question, which is under the seasonal lighting.
Mhm.
There were two sentences there. One was seemed to apply to celebrations outside of the holiday season at the end of the year. Is that right? It was a little confusing to me. There was one that said, that one there. So the first sentence applies to other celebrations other than the holidays around
Mhm.
December, January. Is that correct?
Yes.
So it could be Diwali or something else.
Or like July 4th or
Yeah,
things like
okay.
that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So those would have to be removed within 10 days following the holidays. And then since there are so many back-to-back holidays usually associated with lighting displays throughout November through December and January, that's why we have that period relating to those winter holidays.
Okay.
I think that addresses my concern, you know, what happens if, as long as they turn them off as opposed to keeping them on, they can bring them down, you know, at their leisure, given the weather or whatnot. So, but, you know, I guess it would be temporary as opposed to constant. Although, you know, people are still celebrating, so it's kind of nice with the snow and the lights. But I think they might be doing it at the governor's request. Remember, he had said something about
Keep the lights going.
keep the lights
Yeah.
going.
Pandemic.
Yeah. So, yeah, well, it was, I think, part of the COVID thing to keep people's spirits up.
Oh yeah.
That's nice.
I still have my Christmas tree up. It's fake.
Well, if you look in one of the windows over here, somebody has a lit Christmas tree in the windows.
Oh yeah. I've
That's when
seen
you're
it
coming down the street, it looks kind of neat.
in Pearl Street. Yeah.
I'm glad some of my neighbors are still celebrating Groundhog Day.
Right. Are we moving on to the next item?
Yes.
The EV charging. Review of examples of EV charging regulations.
So maybe I can just introduce this a little bit. I had also been speaking with the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission over the last few days about what they recommend as the best practices, and also what the current state of the law is. I think one thing that's quite relevant here, and I'm not sure it was in the packet, is the residential, the RBES, the residential building efficiency standards, and also the commercial building efficiency standards. The commercial building efficiency standards applies to anything that is covered by Act 250, and the RBES, the residential building one, is for buildings 3 stories or lower, residential buildings, and it covers everything, but it has no teeth. It says that every unit is required by law. Every parking space, it's like 1 parking space per unit. I think it was like that. Has to be level 2 charger capable. So you need to have the conduit through. You need your electrical box needs to be able to handle the current. But it doesn't go as far as to requiring you to actually put in the chargers. Now, there are a lot of state incentives now, which make it pretty cheap. The incremental cost of putting in a few chargers is not that high, but I think the code requires you to make at least 1 space per unit level 2 ready. The only enforcement mechanism is through private litigation. Basically, it's like it says the buyer, like you have to self-certify with the state's form that you meet the RBES standards, and then in the future, if somebody buys your property, or if someone rents your property and then finds out it doesn't meet that requirement, and let's say your house is drafty or whatever, and you can sue for the additional energy you had spent, or you can sue for the amount of money it takes to upgrade all the electrical panels to make it level 2 charger ready. But yeah, that's right now. The letter of the law is that you have to meet that, but there's no teeth. In theory, we could reference that in the land development code, and we could be a little more proactive in looking at plans and checking to see if they have drawn the conduit for the level 2 charging.
So everything you gave us were bylaws from somebody else, correct?
RBES, this is state. This is a
No, I mean, but all the documentation you gave us is from Williston and then from the RPC, et cetera.
Yes.
There's nothing in there you've drafted, correct?
Yes.
No, okay. So this is only for new buildings? It doesn't apply to existing units? They don't have to retrograde?
So you're talking about the RBES or
I'm talking about the number of charging stations you have to have per unit.
under the RBES, the state's standards? Yeah, it only applies to new buildings.
Okay.
Actually, here, I've got that page up right now. I can share.
Yeah, there was somebody on the weekend that had asked about charging pieces, and I said, well,
You got 2020.
so a gentleman had said that they
Oh.
didn't see charging units out, and I said, well, it's not, you're not gonna see them if they're in people's garages in the first place. And second off,
Nobody can read them that small.
is that, you know, it only applies to new development, so. And I said, even then, even some of the new development is going to have the charging stations in the underground parking. So somebody who, unless they go into somebody's underground parking area, they're not going to see the charging units anyhow.
Well, so obviously, as people buy more and more EVs, which is going to happen,
Yes.
the 2%, 8% stuff, I was very confused about all that, what that applies to. But if you have 10 spaces in the, let's say you build something that has 10 units, sorry. And what does our code say? We have to have 2 per, or is it 1? We're down to 1 now, 1 parking space per unit?
One parking space per unit, unless you're in the VC district, in which case it's 0.
Okay, so you have one parking spot allocated to you, but over a 10-unit building, you only have 1 EV. When you don't have any, according to that. 2% is less, you don't have 1. So you have 20 units, you have 1. 1 for 20 vehicles. So what if 4 people have EVs? You run an extension cord through your window? I mean, I'm trying to figure out how this applies to actually encouraging people to buy EVs. It doesn't.
Yeah, I had a question of like, what is the ultimate goal
Yeah.
of implementing this city? Like,
Yeah.
what are we trying to accomplish?
Mhm.
So then I have a number of questions after we decide on that.
But it doesn't unless you later on change the LDC and say, no, now you have to have 4% or 5% or 10%. I mean, if you have two Teslas or a Tesla and a VW in that new place over there next to the tobacco shop, you're not gonna be able to charge your car overnight. And most people charge their cars overnight.
So
Plug it into their garage.
I think you can argue that the RBE standards, if they are met, and if we are careful about making sure that the conduits are put in at the time of construction, you could argue that even though there might not be that many chargers right now, if demand goes up, like many of the landlords may be willing to accommodate building, like adding chargers, because they are at least under the CCRBC's recommended bylaws. They recommend that there should be no prohibition on the landlord charging a usage fee. So I mean, they could recuperate the money or even make some money from having the EV chargers. And I think once the conduits are in there, the additional cost is just the charger, which you would have to pay anyway if you were a single family house and you bought an electric car.
So the
Not
conduit,
necessarily. Electric cars come with a charger you can plug into a standard outlet usually.
Really?
It just takes a lot longer.
Right,
Yeah.
level
Yeah,
one, a level
yeah,
one.
I have a hybrid plug-in and it comes with a charger that you can plug into the wall. It
Wow.
just takes a lot longer.
yeah.
Cool.
So actually, kind of all place, just like throwing things out along these lines of like level 1, level 2, something a colleague who used to work in environmental regulations suggested something that we might want to consider, and you maybe already have, but thinking about making electric vehicles more attractive, if that is part of our interest, like, is it possible to have a conversation, just invite our utility providers in to see, like, what would it take to do like level 3? Like level 2 is significantly better than level 1, but if we're really trying to create an incentive, like, are there maybe there's homework. Are there, either within Vermont or other areas, are there projects that are in, like, kind of trying to encourage level 3 charging? And if we're talking about, like, we just need the conduit in place in order to, like, make EV stations more of a reality, are there other things we could do to make even faster charging, like kind of pre-work, I don't know, to make faster charging more reality, to make it more.
No, I understand what you're saying. I wonder though whether or not, so the level 3s are like half an hour to an hour or something like that to charge to 80%.
Yeah.
To me, that's more like trying to figure out, do we want to put something publicly?
Like it's like some of the
So parking areas and
covered,
stuff, yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And level 2 would be minimum requirement, I think, for housing units.
Also, just my understanding, and I could be completely wrong, so I apologize, but my understanding is that, so level 3 is sort of like the Tesla superchargers,
Yeah,
and not every electric vehicle can
Is
charge
compatible.
via level 3.
Yeah.
You have to have it has to be specially adapted to charge via level 3.
So what's over here and next to the fire department? Two.
Oh, two.
Okay, and what's up at Hannaford's up in Langford?
Probably two.
Yeah,
Probably also
most of the public charging places are level 2. Level 1 would be, I think, just a
The plug.
Into
standard
an
outlet.
outlet.
Yes.
do you use the same cable for level 3 as a level 2?
It's the same like adapter into the
Adapter.
car, but essentially the level 1, like what I got with my car, is it's essentially an extension cord.
Right.
It's one cord plugged into the wall, other side goes in the car.
Right.
I have a level 2 charger that I installed in the house, and that's on the wall of my house
Right,
that I pull the charger.
right. But if you stopped at a level 3,
My car could not charge
couldn't.
level 3.
So my understanding is that level 3 chargers are mostly built around interstate highways. Like the Tesla superchargers tend to be spaced out along there and in order to allow for a kind of longer road trips, and in residential applications, even multifamily. I don't think level 3 is generally considered necessary. Although, I mean, who knows if that will become necessary in the future. But at least the state's code seems to recognize the importance of level 2 over level 1. With the old 2020 version of this actually referred to level 1 as you need to cover all the spots with level 1 capable. It needs to be, every spot needs to be level 1 capable, but then they need to have a certain number level 2 capable. The version of the residential, like the RVES that's going to be in effect, I think in June, says all 1 space per dwelling unit needs to be level 2 capable.
so can I ask a question? So the conduit that you install for the level 2, those are automatically upgradable to more units, or do you have to specify, would we have to specify in the ODC that the conduit that goes in has to be, what's the word, upgradable? It has to be able to add more? Or is the conduit that goes in, or is that just standard? It's you can add more units to it.
What do you
More
mean add more
More
stations? So the conduit, I think it refers to just basically having a tube, like a pipe, an empty pipe that you can then, in the future, if you want to use a thread, an
More
electric cable
cables, yeah.
through.
Oh, so providing the path for a cable, so
Right.
that in the future you don't have to dig up
Right.
the parking
And
lot. You
excavate.
can just
Yeah.
Right.
put it through.
Like
So-
this only makes it easier to get there, but it does not actually force anybody to build
Put the conduit.
the spaces.
So speaking as a half electric car driver, as I've thought about this a lot actually, because I've thought about potentially putting in a charger at my property in Burlington, because I've thought about what is it like to be a renter with an electric car. And the biggest thing for me for driving an electric car is access to charge.
Yeah.
And so in my opinion, seeing the numbers from this of like one charger, 2 chargers at a multi-unit property is like, to me, it's like I would never get an electric car if I had the access to a charger like that.
No, it's one per unit. So, for a building that has 40 residential units, 40 of the spaces need to be level 2 capable,
Capable, but
Capable.
not installable.
but not
Capable,
installed.
but not
Right.
installed.
Initially, they have to install whatever we decide the limit would be.
Right.
I mean, the examples you provided are 2%, or I didn't understand the columns, but 2%, which for 10 units is less than one, so it wouldn't be applicable.
Sorry, yeah, I guess I'm not speaking at that. I think some of the other things that were written here, like maybe some of the existing incentives that we have were. Do we have any incentives? Like I saw other things.
Current right now.
Yeah,
I
nothing.
don't think so.
It-
I think the only thing we have in our LDC is that they've got to comply with whatever the state code was at the time. And of course, that keeps changing.
The
Well,
actually the
yeah.
only thing I could think of that it could be considered kind of an incentive is the fact that we are not very we don't currently consider require a zoning permit to put in
EV chargers.
EV charging station. Whereas I do think some other municipalities grappled with that before and then now are trying to amend their version of the land development code to not to make that exempt from a zoning permit requirement. But yeah, we don't have any other kind of incentive. I think when Newski's was they
Yeah,
if you put in electric vehicle charging, that space counted as 1.5 spaces.
Right.
Yeah, it would
Or,
do-
and something else was 2 spaces, so you got credit for.
But you can only
Yeah.
get a 20% reduction.
Right.
So anyway, but in my opinion, like access is the key. Like, is there enough access for tenants? So if I'm hearing you right, if it's one per unit, which means per space there would be one. That seems like great access. Now, in my opinion, a level 1 access would be adequate and enough. In fact, I would even consider having an outlet at every parking
Yeah.
space.
Well,
That would
that's
be
To
what
do the
we're-
job.
That's what we're
That's an
reading right
interim-
here.
Yeah.
interim
It's
solution.
up here, this,
Mhm.
forget which town this is.
This is
gonna
not any
be-
town. This is the RVS.
Okay, the RBS. So if for new construction, I mean, my comment was like, why don't we put this in, just, we have the signs. They have to tell us the plan of what's going to be, just like we're gonna have a sign in the building or in front of the building, whatever. It's just there. You've gotta have one of these. And this is one per dwelling unit or parking space, well, then that's it. If that's the new code, then that's the new code. Now, are we gonna require people to retrofit? I
No,
don't,
wait, so
I don't think,
are you guys saying that we're gonna have one level 2 charger per every space?
so this was saying
No,
capable. of,
Capable.
So then it has to have
Capable.
the,
Just
Yeah,
The con-
that's what you were saying.
yeah,
Okay,
conduit.
as long as we're, okay.
I'm
Yeah.
suggesting going one step further and putting level 1 capability, even if that's just a standard electrical outlet.
So, I mean,
I
I
like
if I were to guess what developers would say, it would be that would be very limiting for their layouts, and also would significantly increase their costs without many people using it. Now, I think
Wait, can I ask? But how would that change with the level 2? Like, you can put a conduit underneath a parking space, sure, but if you ever wanted to install a level 2, you need the space to do that. So how is that different than having a space for an outlet?
that's true.
level of service to the building, the level of electrical service to the building.
Well, they are supposed to, according to the RBES, it needs the electrical service has to be robust enough to take the current of all of those actually all those charging stations actually being built. But it seems like from the bylaws of some other cities and what the CCRPC recommends, you could have the effect of having good access without having all the spaces with a plug or a charging station, if you make it so that those spots cannot be assigned to certain people and those are reserved for electric vehicle owners, right? I think you would only need every space to have a plug if you expect everybody to have a a plug-in vehicle.
Right. No, I mean, I think what you're saying, makes sense and it sounds great in a perfect world. But I've seen plenty of places where, someone will park their electric car and leave it forever. And you're never going to get access to that. I just mean, and this is just my opinion personally. If I don't have the access to the charging that I need, I'm not gonna go ahead and get the electric car at this point.
Well, I think that we would want to try to be proactive, that if this is the coming way of things, and if there's state regulation that we needed to, as we did state regulations the last time, if this is the way of things coming, then why wouldn't we be proactive and say, it needs to be, the conduit needs to be there, it needs to be capable to be hooked up, if you want to do best practices, it would be all of them. I mean, you can just do that sort of a thing and just say, this is where this is going to go.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with putting that in there that says, obviously, if it's state statute, that you need to put in the infrastructure. That's what essentially it's saying. You need to put in the infrastructure that's available for the future to install a charger. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that. I'm just saying, if the goal is for us to want to incentivize city residents to be able to purchase electric cars, or then I think it's important to go the one step further to make sure that the access is there. This is putting the access down the road.
Right. I guess in the parking lots, minimal parking lots that we do have, should the city be putting some of these in other than over here at the fire station? I don't know that the one over here has got, or the one that we're renting over there, or leasing, Firebird has got anything. I mean, do we want to, get the city to essentially, put up, if we really are behind this, are we gonna, be proactive and do these things and say, hey, now there's a charging piece here.
Yeah, I think those are maybe two separate but related issues. I
Right.
think on the one hand, we're talking about residents, and then this other one is like public space, making chargers available so that if a resident needs it, they can, but that they're not depending on it, and rather it's kind of maybe we're doing it the second as more of like,
I'm thinking that if we have some residents, if we require them, if somebody does bring, I know that a lot of times I bring my car, I do all my shopping, let's say in Five Corners, and I bring my car, and it sits in one spot for a while. So would that be different if I had an electric car and I plugged it in, did all my errands and shopping, and then, so that person could be a resident here.
they could absolutely.
Okay.
But
So, I
we
mean,
wouldn't want to be setting something up where like that was like three residents had to depend on the public space in the town square. But it could be like, absolutely, the resident could use it, but it could also be part of a, like, in terms of like supporting like our downtown commercial
Right.
entities. Like you're absolutely right. Like if I'm living over in Milton and I have an EV, and I know that there's a couple charging stations in Essex Junction, like more likely to come here, plug in, go get a coffee, like walk somewhere else,
Right.
do something else. So I think, I definitely think it's a great idea. Maybe, I think it's, if we could find ways to do both, and they may or may not be kind of connected in the same piece of
Yeah, I think
our.
the residential side of it is the access, like I mentioned, and it seems like what they're trying to address with saying put the infrastructure in now. But we definitely, I think, also address the commercial side, having any commercial development include those, and retrofitting, I think, would be important too.
Retrofit is, well, okay, so if this is a part of the land development code, there's only a kind of enforcement power when
Sure.
when they come in for a permit.
Sure.
So it could be when there's a major site plan amendment or some level of site plan amendment
Yeah.
where it makes sense that you could require a certain level of investment. But yeah, new construction is probably the most likely place where this will have immediate impact.
So
Yeah,
this would not affect those new plans, like the one over here on Railroad, that have already been approved by the DRB. They would not have, they would
No.
not.
This would not. No.
Not unless they came in for some kind of major renovation or
Yeah.
site plan amendment.
Unless the council passed the LDC last week, or 2 weeks or a month ago.
Yeah.
My anecdotal evidence is that most people, like you said, Scott, most people charge at home overnight, because I think there's lots of studies out there that show like most people only drive like 20 miles a day, 30 miles a day at most. And so all that little bit you're driving, even my plug-in hybrid gets 40 miles on a full charge. So I like almost never charge anywhere else but home. But I know when my wife goes to the office in Waterbury once a week, she charges when she gets to Waterbury because it takes most of the charge to get there and then come back. So like having the access at home, but then also having the spaces in commercial properties, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And it's also a little bit of an issue if we have certain parking requirements. Let's say that, if a multifamily building maybe has 40 units and it requires 40 parking spaces and they have exactly that number, and maybe 2 residents or so would be, driving electric cars. Yeah, so that's one of those things that I was thinking about what you said with having those electric cars not be allocated with those. So it might be a situation where you require 40 parking spaces and then a certain number of like electric cars based on maybe proportional to the total number of units, so that any residents who live there can charge at those spaces, but then also park, overnight if needed, in their regular parking space.
So let's just take one last scenario here. Let's say the city were to build a 2-level parking garage. That wouldn't be included under this, would it?
If the city were to build a 2-level parking garage, which would be a structure. It would require a zoning permit for ourselves, and it would, if we require it, then the city would have to comply with its own rules.
So it's not just residential, it's any new construction that requires a permit.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how it's written.
Okay.
The RBES standards are, a separate thing. That's only for residential, but there's also commercial building energy efficiency standards, which also. So there's there's the state rules that are already in place with varying levels of enforceability, and then there's what we can put into the LDC and enforce ourselves. I guess I have several questions that maybe the planning commission can provide some feedback on as to how to move forward here. I mean, we've got a few examples here, but one important question is how far do we want to just look at the best practices or like the strongest policies around us and just copy, or do we want to kind of go ahead, be stricter than that? With the knowledge that if you're at the leading edge of something, you can be on the bleeding edge sometimes. There's that, and kind of, and also what do you envision as some good policy that maybe we'll circle back to and see if something technically makes sense, or if we have good examples that we could propose.
So what's the energy standard? Something about something by 30, something by 50 or whatever. I forget what the going piece is. Something that I think the state wanted a certain number of electric vehicles, or we're trying to go in that direction. So let's say if 30, I remember something about 30 by 30 and 50 by, I mean, that might be with forestry, but anyhow,
Well, then there's a town energy plan too,
there's a town energy plan. Well, I don't, well,
which is totally
we
unrealistic.
need to eventually have one for the city. So, hey, I wouldn't mind looking to see what Williston or any of these, where these, I would say, Chris, why don't you draft something up? And see what you think the good standard would be.
Well,
I mean,
that
so you're asking, should we copy? I would say, hey, go by that level 2 thing that's up here. Looked pretty good. There was another chart there about stuff. So proactive, well, people will buy electric cars if they have, as Phil has said, if I can plug in, my wife plugs in, I mean, they might or have a chance to buy an electric car if they have. And I've read that other places. They'll buy one only if they know that they can plug in and aren't left stranded.
so
So,
I mean, I think we definitely can put some draft together, but I do think the question out there still stands that, like, should we just be looking at adjacent municipalities, because I don't think anybody has very strong requirements right now. Is that
Right.
like
Yeah,
what's
that's my
your
impression as
read?
well.
What do you mean by strong? I mean, we
Like
just-
not many municipalities are requiring that electric EV chargers themselves be put in. They're just like meet the RPA standards and make them electric vehicle ready.
oh no,
Most are saying that, and I'm not even like there. How is there anybody? South Burlington has something.
Not that I could find. It's possible that it's there, but
A lot of the zoning bylaws have been tweaked to make it easier to put in electric vehicle chargers, but have not gone as far as requiring them, which to me is a little bit surprising given the likely exponential curve of electric vehicle adoption. But at the same time, if we go beyond what many other municipalities are requiring, there would probably be an outcry and that maybe some people won't develop here.
not necessarily, because if I read what you shared and what you were talking about before, is the landlords can take the opportunity to propose and get approved a charging fee or some cover of their investment, just like they would pass off the improvements to the rent. So I don't think it's a lost leader for them. I think there's an opportunity if you build it right. What's the thing about Field of Dreams? If you build it right. But,
Yeah.
I think we should be as proactive or as active as we want to be to try to encourage it. When you were talking about the number of EV charging stations, I had just assumed that you meant that they had to build one. So, no, I mean, I'd like to encourage it, make it so that they have to build one, but make it clear that they're not going to lose money on it because they can charge a fee.
Yeah,
well, I mean,
think-
that's for commercial, but let's say that we had somebody put up a single family home. Should we encourage, I would say we should indeed encourage the capabilities of having an EV charger in a newly built single family home or duplex or whatever. We should just do it and just say, this is the new standard. Worst comes to worst, it's the electric cord and somebody has some place to plug in their vacuum cleaner a lot closer to the car than the house.
Well, no, it's
I
just,
mean,
it's
in all
like-
seriousness.
it's
okay.
like putting in a dryer connection in your garage.
Yes.
It's a 250 volt or 240 as opposed to 120.
I think deciding on what the goal is of implementing this legislation would be a good starting place. I think at the bare minimum, the requirements to have access make sense. I think my opinion is adding requirements for commercial development makes sense. So actually having requirements for EV chargers in commercial parking makes sense. And then, if we're gonna have new builds put in the infrastructure, maybe having coordination for getting grants to landlords for installing the chargers. So like we can help promote those sorts of things, I think. And also new builds for single families and duplexes should include them as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
That's the easier access.
that's the, well,
than-
it's
than the
easier access.
multi-unit.
It's got to be,
Yeah.
oh, yeah. I mean, it's like putting in an electric dryer or electric stove. I mean, seriously. I mean, it's the same thing. And supposedly that's, the way to go again. So what, I don't see why we wouldn't prescribe that in new construction, that it definitely happens, that there's a minimal standard. If it's one per or capable of having all of them with at least one or two, putting on the size, and just say that's the standard we're requiring.
I think the cost to new build and even retrofitting is probably negligible because they do get the service fees from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think residential is a little more fuzzy there. I'm not sure. My experience in Burlington with my property is that any common space electrical must be paid by the landlord. So I wonder I don't know the specifics of how charging fits on that because it is a common electrical. Or maybe there's
Or you could charge usage fees for when you
or if you
actually-
charge, yeah.
Yeah, like you might have to punch in a code to show it's you, and yeah.
I don't know how
Charge it
that
to
would all
your
work out.
Unit or something.
But I think the cost to commercial owners
I mean,
would
Green Mountain Power
be negligible.
has been having all kinds of incentives to do wonderful things with lighting and all other stuff. I would find it hard to believe that they wouldn't have some kind of incentive to do electric car charging.
Well,
Yeah.
the thing that I don't really understand, because I haven't looked into it, is the Inflation Reduction Act is supposed to have all kinds of incentives for charging stations. Now, most of that's the 500,000 they want to build on interstates and state highways. But in addition to that, I don't even know if there's other incentives in there for other installations. I mean, and I don't know how that passes down, if it passes down directly, if it has to go through states, or whether or not that's something that could be applied for separately. But the idea of looking for potential grants and stuff, I think it's the same thing we talked about with landlords. What kind of grants or subsidized loans could you look at?
Because obviously, as soon as you start mandating this electrical load on the property, that is increased cost, and even just for the installation.
There are currently a lot of grants. Like there are currently grants from the state to cover like it's something like 50% of the installation costs. It's a good deal right now. I don't know if it's always going to be there. And also, I would be hesitant to take on the additional work of offering like a coordination with the grants. We could advertise them. But in terms of actually helping coordinate grants, I'm not sure we'd be ready to take that on.
No, I'm just making it aware of what grants exist for
Right.
people to access, or rebates, if you want to call them that.
Right. So am I hearing that the commission is interested in a draft of some draft amendments to the land development code that would require, first of all, meeting RBES requirements for making the spaces electrical ready, and also adding in some kind of requirements for multi-unit buildings to have actual chargers installed, even if that is a stricter standard than our surrounding municipalities. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, for me,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for the draft, yeah.
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah, and this is essentially what you outlined, Phil. In terms of the RBS.
That's a
like,
baseline.
Just
yeah.
putting it as the baseline, but then considering something
Yeah.
additional, since starting
Yeah.
with commercial.
Okay.
Be creative.
Well, I think that means looking beyond Vermont, really.
I've already got some ideas. So, all right.
I mean, the difficulty here is that I don't think that these are impediments to people buying like EVs. I think the impediment is that they're expensive. Now, the costs are coming down for Bolts and other ones, but your middle of the road EV is still 40,000 plus. And then rebates take it off, but I mean, it's expensive, and then the inconvenience of driving across the country. So it's got to be a second car for most people. I think that's, to me, that's the impediment that we're facing.
Scott,
Yeah.
cars are expensive right now.
I know that.
So 40 grand for a car is unfortunately normal.
It's expensive to buy a home now too.
That too.
Starting to be less expensive to rent. Yeah.
So
It's interesting because I talked to a dealer when I bought my car, which was 40,000 because it was during the pandemic, and it was the only Outback available in the entire state. But when I talked to him, he said they target their population, they target their market as 23 to 26,000. That's what they try to sell it.
I'm sure that's not electric.
No. These are
Average.
gas guzzlers. What
Yes.
I'm saying for EVs, you're lucky if you can get one for less than 40. You're lucky. And my sister bought a Bolt and she paid 35. Now they're coming down, but still, I think it's more costly than people can afford.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But all that taken into
Yeah.
consideration, I think to your point earlier, Diane, like this is the way of the future. Like this
Right.
is coming. The curve, it's still very expensive, but like things are moving in that direction.
no,
And if we're talking about like building like buildings and setting them up, that are going to be here for the next 30, 50, 100 plus years, like setting them up so that like we're not doing a whole bunch of digging to put the conduit in, when, in 5-10 years when the prices come down, things have shifted and uptake is higher than what we're seeing currently. I mean, I think this is something I can appreciate people being hesitant about. I like the idea of being aspirational and maybe more aggressive about what might we do in addition to what municipalities around us are currently doing in terms of like actual chargers, etc. But I think, again, to your point, Chris, like getting the baseline in place, making sure that basic infrastructure, so that whatever form it is, the commercial space or the residential space can accommodate it, like as a baseline, like absolutely, we should be at least there.
Sounds good.
Do you need any
No,
more direction? Or is that,
I've got it all
I
written
think
down.
that's-
Yeah, I've been writing as we were talking.
she's looking forward to it.
Yeah.
We can actually use this as another incentive for promoting Essex Junction as a destination.
Yeah, because if anything, it's an extra kind of utility. If we have a lot of EV chargers and not a lot of people with EV, electric cars, it will kind of create the ability of like, okay, well, I live in a city where this is accessible to me now. Maybe I can consider making that transition, for longer term residents. But also people just visiting, being like, oh, well, this is a convenience. This is a nice thing to have. Whereas if people don't use it, there's no harm to having it anyway. So, yeah, I think it's really beneficial and will become a lot more prominent in the coming years, especially as we're trying to transition to more renewable energy systems. So, great.
Do you think it makes sense for this whole land development code efforts to do? At what point would it make sense to put an effort to reach out to landlords and developers? I certainly don't want to kind of fatigue them with many separate asks, but also I do think their input is would be beneficial. Yeah.
For the whole LDC?
Well, or just like is there some kind of strategy that would make sense in terms of when we reach out, or should it be right now for anything about EV charging or lights or anything, or should we wait till we have a kind of draft and then do it at once?
Well, I don't know, if you take Phil's comment to start off the rental registry, you've got how long is the LDC? 200 and some odd pages, right? You got a lot of stuff in there, some of it, and there's a lot of revisions from the last one. Question is, do you want to have a public hearing where you're got people coming in and talking about 287 pages? Or do you want to have that communication outreach now? And have to go back and revise the LDC after you have a public hearing? I think my suggestion is the more stakeholders you can engage in the process now, the better off you're going to be later on.
I'd be interested to understand like how the residential model like functions. So let's say that there's a new development and they put in level 2 chargers at every single parking space. Like how, I know how commercial chargers function. Like you put a credit card and it charges you a fee and it charges you for the electric and et cetera. But how does that work in residential? So I'd be interested to understand that model, because I think that gives us an idea of like what the cost to property owners would be. Because I think I could see this being property owners, landlords saying, this is going to make my costs go up a ton.
Yeah.
But we can understand and bring people to the table to actually say, this is how the model works. You can charge fees based this way. I don't like, that's what I would like to understand that before we put anything to law.
Sounds good. I can do some research in that direction, try to get a better understanding, and have that information available so that whenever these questions arise, I can point to it or connect people to the right contacts, the right people to ask.
But coming back to your question, I think it'd be useful to have a conversation with landlords and developers on this particular issue. But the question for the council is, how much pre-consultation do you want to do before the public hearing on the whole code? Maybe you don't. Maybe you just have a public
Well,
hearing.
no, I don't know. I would say that, quite frankly, we're having this discussion. It is here. Should we possibly let the landlords know that we're discussing this now? And love to see them then chat with us about, what EVs might be doing for them. It's, we encourage people to do EVs. That might be a good thing. I'd love to talk to, I guess, energy people to see what the trends are and that sort of thing. Because I'm a little bit away from that right now. So, is it going to hurt to invite the landlord community, since we are talking about them again? And it's like, hi, missed you. You weren't here to have a chat with us. But why not? I mean, worst comes to worst, maybe a few people show up. Maybe some of them have actually looked at it. And are informed about how EVs work with renters.
I think we can try to organize something. Maybe perhaps when we have some kind of draft.
Yeah.
And also, I think there are the landlords, but we can also try to see if there's like some, EV encouraging nonprofit or something. Like I don't know if it's like there's got to be some organization, some organization that can advocate for EVs, or someone who has experience with the installation of these things.
Vermont, what is it called?
Efficiency Vermont?
No, the essentially National Resources Council of Vermont. Forget the acronym now. But they do fairs. They do EV fairs. There was one in wasn't Waterbury, Duxbury recently that I went to this summer, where they get private Williston has one as well. They get private owners to bring their vehicles in, and then they open it up to the public to come and look at the vehicles and to have discussions with owners and stuff. and they're very much into EVs.
What were they called?
It's the, what's it called? The Vermont Environmental, it's not Natural Resources Council.
You can.
I'll
maybe
find,
you
I'll
can
find the,
check it,
I'll
yeah.
find the email and send it to you, Chris. But they're very active in promoting EVs.
Great.
And they hold these fairs all over the state. In fact, one of the things that came up at the focus group was trying to connect with them to have a fair in Essex Junction.
Okay.
You know, you could have it right in the parking lot behind Firebird.
It's a drive electric.
Hmm?
There is Drive
No,
Electric Vermont also.
There's probably a number of organizations. I'll find it. These are locally sponsored. So when I went to the one, they had everybody there from Volkswagen to Hyundai and Kia, and they even had a Ford F-150.
Okay, so we can try to find somebody with experience or expert knowledge in this to attend one of these planning commission meetings if they're willing, and so yeah, I think that might help with understanding costs and implementation. If they know of successful implementations of multi-unit buildings who has good policy.
All right. Moving on to members updates. Any updates from the members? Scott, you wanted to
talk
comment.
about last
Well,
few days.
Yeah, I'm sorry, there's VCAN, which is the Vermont Energy and Climate Action Network. Yeah, I just want to talk about the strategic plan, vision and strategic plan. So there was an open house on Saturday coupled with a community meal. We had a fairly good turnout because there were about 60 or 70 people at the community meal budget discussion. So we corralled them to put up things. There's now 6 pillars for those that haven't been involved. Housing and density, transportation, economic development, services and facilities, environment, and community engagement.
Right.
So each of the pillars were up on the wall, and people were able to put sticky papers up there recommending actions. Out of that there were focus group discussions on Monday and Tuesday. I think Diane's the only one that went to every single one that I know of.
The joys of being retired and you have a flexible schedule.
I went to 3. And they produced a lot of good discussions, and the consultants are pulling things together. And there's another steering committee meeting on the 9th to discuss the results. There was supposed to be I think it was on February 14th meeting, there was supposed to be presentation to the public of the draft, but now it's been postponed until I think the March meeting of the council.
Yeah, I'm about to say, I thought it was like the 14th, but okay.
Whatever the March meeting is. There might be an update at the council meeting on the 14th, but I know that it's now been moved to March to give everybody more time. There's going to be a second community survey, online survey.
I thought that was going to be out by the 14th,
What?
the survey.
Yeah, it's going to be designed and put online soon. And that will be more detail based on the 6 pillars. So good progress. A lot of good ideas came out. Yeah.
You might not know this, but has there been, based on the initial survey and the lack of very limited but regional representation across the city, has there been anything? Has the team? Do they have any ideas on how to get more survey response or survey response from a broader swath of the city?
No.
Okay.
What you're dealing with is you're dealing with the existing situation, which is very difficult to mobilize. I did canvassing all around 5 Corners, all the businesses. Everybody said they'd come, and I sat down with Jake Tron at the Nest for an hour and a half because he wasn't supposed to be here, but then he was gonna be here, but he didn't come anyway. So unless you go to some of these, and unless you have the connections, the engagement groupings, you know, the stakeholder groups, it's very difficult right now to spread it out and try to get more people.
Yeah.
We could go house to house. Everybody got a postcard.
Oh, they got postcards, okay, I mean, they had these flyers, okay, and it took the initial survey results and started out with some kernels of things up at the top. And which is, you know, here, like, community engagement, I think it was very popular day. There were some people who came in that they got these phone calls, hey, we need you to come in here and blah, blah. So some of our local community engagement people were ringers and came in and had chats. So that was nice. There was anywhere from a dozen to 18 people at any point in time. And so hopefully there'll be some process and philosophy and whatnot, how to reach. I mean, there was a lot of dialogue that went on about how do you reach certain segments of the population and what methods are you going to use. I mean, we did get granular, not just the big philosophy statement. So I don't know what was on the other group, but I mean, it's if we take the suggestions that people were telling us how to reach them or reach others, maybe we'll be more successful next time.
It's
The-
clearly a challenge. I'm
Just-
curious.
just
so much
to-
work has been done.
Just to back up a second here is that I think the selection committee for the consultants and the council at some point, I think it was in October meeting, discussed that it probably would have been beneficial to build the stakeholder networks first and then hire the consultant to do the work. Because the stakeholder networks are not in effect. They're not there. They're there, but they're not there. I mean, their groupings are all over the city, but they're not connected to what's going on. And people are busy. And then, as Diane and I noted, the meetings are on Monday and Tuesday. People work.
Right. I mean, both sessions were during the first shift work hours, so if you,
So I wasn't there.
okay. And yes, you needed to be present to play the game. And so there was no, you know, over online Zoom, you couldn't, you know, peek in, you couldn't watch. You had to participate, that was it. So that was, you know, yes, there was Zoom on Saturday, but there wasn't any Zoom on Monday or Tuesday. Would things have been different if people could Zoom in? Maybe that's something that should happen, you know, at another time. You know, conduct a Zoom survey, sort of interactive thing. I don't know. But
What you're gonna find for the online survey coming out this time, we should probably get somewhere between 300 and 600 people to respond. That's sort of historical averages here. And it'll be interesting to see how the council promotes this and publicizes it and sort of launches it. So the answer is not something that happen this time. Hopefully next time.
Yeah. Well, more information.
All right. Moving on to staff updates. Any staff updates?
I don't really have anything to note other than what you said we had already.
Right. Then I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Meeting adjourned.